Philadelphia, a city pulsing with rhythm, it bleeds music, its heart beating to the drum of 1,000 dreams. YBC DUL was one of those dreams. A young man with a voice raw and real, his lyrics painted pictures of life in his section of Philly. He didn't sugarcoat it. He told his truth, and people felt that. They flocked to his shows, hungry for authenticity. His star was rising, burning bright and full of promise. He was going to make it out. He had to. YBC DUL's music wasn't just about struggle, though. It was about resilience. It was about finding hope in the cracks of the concrete. He spoke for a generation failed by the system, a generation told to pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they were never given boots in the first place. His words were a lifeline, a testament to the power of survival. He gave a voice to the voiceless, and that made him dangerous. August in Philly. The air thick with humidity and the smell of hot asphalt. The streets were alive, kids playing under fire hydrants, music blasting from open windows. But the music stopped on that Tuesday. The news spread like wildfire, scorching the airwaves and social media feeds. YBC DUL was gone, gunned down, another life extinguished too soon. Details were scarce, whispers and rumors filling the void. He was on his way to the studio, they said. A robbery gone wrong, some speculated. The hows and whys didn't matter much in the face of the cold, hard truth. Another young black man taken by the violence that plagued their streets. Another dream silenced before it could reach its full potential. Disbelief, anger, despair. Emotions washed over the city like a tidal wave. YBC DUL wasn't just an artist, he was a son, a brother, a friend. He was a beacon of hope in a city that often felt hopeless. And now he was gone, leaving behind a void that no amount of music could fill. The streets where he once walked, where his music once blared from car stereos, were now silent with grief. People gathered at the corner where it happened, laying down candles and flowers, their tears mingling with the rain. They wrote messages on posters, their words a mix of love, pain, and defiance. They vowed to keep his memory alive, to make sure his death wasn't in vain. The mourning stretched beyond the borders of Philadelphia. Social media became a digital tapestry of grief, fans and fellow artists from all walks of life expressing their shock and sorrow. They shared his music, his lyrics resonating with even greater poignancy now. His words, once a source of inspiration, now served as a painful reminder of a life cut short. News outlets picked up the story, headlines lamenting the loss of a rising star. They talked about his talent, his potential, his impact on the community. But beneath the surface, a familiar narrative lurked, the narrative of a young black man lost to gun violence, a narrative that had become all too common in America. Section 5. Echoes in the industry. The music industry, often criticized for its silence on social issues, found its voice in the wake of YBC DUL's death. Established artists used their platforms to pay tribute, to call for an end to the violence, to demand justice for a life taken too soon. Record labels pledged donations to organizations fighting gun violence, their logos now symbols of a newfound awareness. But the question lingered, was it enough? Would these gestures translate into real change? Or would they fade away like the countless hashtags and social media campaigns before them? The industry had a responsibility, not just to mourn the loss of talent, but to actively dismantle the systems that allowed such tragedies to occur. Section 6. More than music. YBC DUL was more than just a musician. He was a product of his environment, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. He grew up in a neighborhood ravaged by poverty, where gunshots were a soundtrack to daily life. He saw firsthand the impact of systemic racism, the way it chipped away at the hopes and dreams of his community. His music was a reflection of that reality, a raw and unflinching portrayal of life on the margins. He rapped about the struggles, the pain, the anger, but also the love, the loyalty, the sense of community that thrived despite the odds. His words were a mirror held up to society, forcing people to confront the uncomfortable truths they'd rather ignore. Section 7. The Plague of Violence. Gun violence. A plague that had infected America's soul, disproportionately impacting black and brown communities. It was a complex issue, with roots in poverty, systemic racism, and a culture that often glorified violence. It robbed communities of their fathers, their sons, their brothers, their friends. It stole futures and shattered dreams, leaving behind a trail of grief and trauma. The statistics were staggering, the numbers numbing. But behind each statistic was a name, a face, a story. YBC DUL was more than just another statistic. He was a life cut short, a reminder that this wasn't just a problem for those communities, it was an American problem, and it demanded an American solution. Section 8. Systemic Scars. The roots of gun violence ran deep, intertwined with the systemic racism that permeated American society. It was evident in the lack of economic opportunities, the underfunded schools, the over-policing of black and brown neighborhoods. It was a vicious cycle, one that trapped generations in a web of poverty and despair. YBC DUL's story was a tragic example of this cycle. He was a talented young man with a gift for music, but his circumstances made it difficult for him to escape the grip of his environment. He knew the streets were dangerous, but he also knew they were his reality. He had dreams, but the system seemed determined to keep them out of reach. Section 9. A Legacy Unfinished. In the wake of his death, there were calls for change. People demanded stricter gun control laws, investment in underprivileged communities, and an end to the systemic racism that fueled the cycle of violence. They marched in the streets, their voices echoing YBC DUL's lyrics, their anger fueled by the knowledge that this tragedy could have been prevented. YBC DUL's legacy wasn't just his music, it was the hope he inspired, the voice he gave to the voiceless. His death was a tragedy, but it also served as a catalyst for change. It forced people to confront the uncomfortable truths about their society, to acknowledge the systemic issues that allowed such tragedies to occur. Section 10. Finding Hope in Tragedy. The pain of YBC DUL's loss would linger, a scar on the soul of Philadelphia. But even in the midst of grief, there was hope. Hope in the outpouring of love and support from his community. Hope in the voices that rose up demanding change. Hope in the young people who were inspired by his music, his story, his unwavering belief in a better tomorrow. YBC DUL's dream didn't die with him. It lived on in the hearts of those who knew him, in the music he left behind, in the fight for a more just and equitable world. His story wasn't just a tragedy, it was a call to action, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could still bloom. Section 11. A Call for Change. This wasn't the end of YBC DUL's story, it was just the beginning. It was up to each and every person touched by his music, his life, his death, to ensure that his legacy lived on, to fight for the changes he could no longer fight for himself, to break the cycle of violence and create a world where young black men and women no longer had to live in fear. YBC DUL's voice may have been silenced, but his message was louder than ever. It was a message of hope, of resilience, of the power of music to unite and inspire. It was a call for change, a demand for justice, a plea for a better tomorrow. and it was a call that could no longer be ignored.